This video is for Chapter 6, Part 1 for AP Enviro. The intro case study is looking at the exponential growth of the human population in the last couple thousand years. And it's talking about how for most of human history, we've been well below 1 billion, closer to maybe like half a billion, until we started to see certain things happen. Okay, and of course, the first one was the development of agricultural techniques, which allowed humans to settle in one location instead of being hunters and gatherers and having to follow the food. Which, of course, once you settle in one location, that also means you have waste accumulating in one location. You have resources being used from one location, which takes longer to regenerate. But that's the first part. The second major event that happened, of course, is the Industrial Revolution, which allowed for resources to be produced or to be consumed and goods to be produced at a rapid pace. It also allowed for improvements in sanitation and medicine, which, of course, are going to extend the average human lifespan. And then the third major event had to do with globalization. So the fact that we are now able to get things from anywhere around the world. We're not just information, but also goods. And then also, of course, for example, the resource use here in the United States, a lot of the goods that we consume and use are produced in other countries. So there is a resource impact on those countries. Never mind the waste production when you talk about shipping waste to other countries. So just make sure that you remember what the three major factors are for the rapid rise in human population. Okay, so moving on to Section 1. When we look at Section 1, there's some information that you need to make sure you know. Of course, we're comparing population growth in more developed countries versus less developed countries. So as we go through Chapter 6, it's important to understand why there's differences between those two, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we also need to understand that even though population was exponentially growing, we are starting to see some slowing in that growth. Okay, currently we are roughly about 7.5 billion people on the planet, and it's projected that by about 2050 we are going to hit anywhere between 9 to 10 billion people on the planet, which is problematic because, again, the more people there are, the more resources are consumed, and the more waste is produced. And so we know that there is a carrying capacity for the Earth, but we don't know what that carrying capacity is. The other thing with this is we also know that human population is not evenly distributed around the world. So, and a lot of that has to do, again, with resources, how resources are distributed around the world. And remember, that has to do with all the geologic events and how the Earth itself has shaped over time and the movement of those tectonic plates, and that's going to create differences in where resources are found. Simple things like fresh water, like fertile soil, and then also once you start talking about minerals and other things. And so people, of course, tend to settle where there's fresh water, and then, of course, where there's fertile soil. So that has an impact on distribution as well. All right. So again, going back to the idea that the Earth has a carrying capacity, that's a limiting factor for the human population. So we know that there's a carrying capacity. We just don't know what it is. There is an argument with some scientists saying that the Earth is rapidly exceeding the carrying capacity of that because we do see starvation occurring in certain parts of the world. We do see rapid use of fresh water, which takes a very long time to regenerate. And so they believe that we're very quickly degrading a lot of those life support systems that exist on the planet. Whereas there's other scientists who say that, well, technology is such that we are able to compensate and that we can easily sustain these large numbers of people on the planet. And the problem is, of course, we don't know what the answer is to that question, and we're not going to be able to find out until until there's some, unfortunately, some major problems. So that's just something that's continued to be argued back and forth. The other limiting factor on the human population are those basic, what are called Malthusian factors. You learned about them in bio at first when you learned about evolution, and it's the three things that keep a population under control or under check, especially human population, which is war, because people are fighting for territory and fighting for resources, and of course when there's war there's death, and that's going to decrease a population. Famine, when there's not enough food or even sometimes water plays a part in that. That's also going to cause death, which can reduce a population. And then disease, because especially the more compact a population is, the easier it is for disease to spread through that population. And of course, certain types of disease can also be deadly and therefore also reduce the population. When we look at density-dependent limiting factors specifically, things that are going to come into play dependent on the population size, that's going to be things like access to clean water, clean air, availability of food, how fast or how quickly disease can be transmitted through the population, and then the territory size. And then, of course, the density-independent factors are going to be things like major storms, major hurricanes, drought, of course, because that's going to be lack of fresh water to drink, as well as impacting agriculture. Heat waves, because not every place in the world has air conditioning, and of course, air conditioning, when you talk about energy usage, that's a whole nother issue. But as we've seen this past summer, there have been some record heat waves all over the world, which has resulted in numerous deaths. And then, of course, fires. So all of these things are going to impact the human population regardless of the size. So when our population is growing, remember, we alter the environment to meet our needs, okay, to meet our resource needs, to meet our population growth. And so it's important to understand how we're degrading the natural capital that exists on the planet as we're doing such. So make sure that you understand the examples that are in this box right here.